Hey guys, I'm back and I have a really special one for you today because we're going to review The Deadliest Warrior, the video game. And you're probably wondering why I'm reviewing this game like this, but I actually find this game really interesting and kind of fascinating. Not so much the game itself, but this whole phenomenon about video game movie tie-ins. So I'm just going to take a look and we'll see what we find.
Let's just take a look at the list right here. We got A Bug's Life, we got Braveheart, we got Chicken Little, we got G-Force, we got Ghostbusters, we have like every single Harry Potter, we have 3 High School Musical video games, we got Home Alone the video game, Ice Age the video game, Last Action Hero the video game, Kick-Ass. It just seems like every single movie that's ever been made has had some cheap movie tie-in video game.
But first, let me give you guys a little history lesson.
Video game tie-ins have been a thing since the dawn of computer games as a medium. Looking back, there were a lot of these kind of games during the early years of console gaming. Back then, games didn't really have their own style of medium or their own brands. Our mid-80s audience were foreign to video game concepts and ideas, so using the cultural knowledge of film meant that they could recognize setting and gameplay ideas. It allowed them to make 2-button, 10-minute long video games that have not stood the test of time, or really any kind of test. These were cheaply made shovelware, churned out to capitalize on whatever success the original product had. This would culminate to the infamous E.T. game, a game whose poor quality almost sank the entire industry.
Hyperspace, ready, hit it!
Wait, where's the hyperspace?
Quality control, making sure the games were fun and enjoyable first, and some powerful brand names such as Super Mario and Zelda would eventually cause Nintendo to stand tall, making these tie-in games look like cheap knockoffs. But I'm gonna move ahead here to the PS2 Xbox era. In my opinion, this was the golden age of movie tie-in games. Not really in terms of quality, but just sheer numbers and relevance. The PS2 is the most accessible and most sold console of all time, with 158 million units sold. This meant the console was mainstream with a large, varied user base. The logic remained the same here. Capitalize on the success of other properties. Did your kid like Over the Hedge or Madagascar? Great! Now they'll love the new Over the Hedge video game. This was also after the awkward first years of 3D gaming. Developers and audiences alike were now much more comfortable with 3D game design. We had next-gen classics like Devil May Cry, Grand Theft Auto, and Metal Gear Solid 2. This meant tie-in games had a big library to fall back on for ideas. You see this a lot, where tie-in games were clearly ripping off other video games with a familiar setting and characters. SpongeBob is Jak and Daxter, Lord of the Rings is Devil May Cry, Star Wars Battlefront is Battlefield, The Sopranos video game is some bad GTA clones. We also had big companies like EA and THQ, whose main division was to develop these movie tie-in games. Some lessons were learned from the earlier NES games, though. Nintendo's concept of quality control remains present. These games may have been uninspired, bland, and boring, but they remain playable. And hey, we even got some good ones here too, like Lord of the Rings, King Kong, Star Wars Battlefront, and Spider-Man 2. By the end of the 6th generation, games development had ballooned when making the jump to new hardware. Games were much more complicated and a lot more expensive. This made tie-in games not the easy slam dunks that they once were, and by the end of the PS3 era, they had almost completely fizzled out. The rise of Blackberries and smartphones also siphoned away the casual and kid gamers with their free alternatives. So that finally brings us to Deadliest Warrior, the video game, which came out at the tail end of all of this in 2010. But first,
Is Deadliest
Spike TV network, The Deadliest Warrior. This show aired in 2009. If you haven't seen it, Deadliest Warrior is a reality TV show that pits two ancient warriors against each other. We have some experts, I guess, who swing a bunch of old weapons and trash talk each other. The data is used in a simulation to decide who is deadliest. And I gotta say, as a 13-year-old at the time, I thought this was just the coolest TV show I've ever seen. Yeah, it's stupid, it's silly, it's corny, it's repetitive, the simulation aspects are laughably vague and stupid, but watching these middle-aged men explode pigs and dummies with historical weapons while looking smug and dismissing their opposition was enough for me as a kid. I think people forget that this game was a big deal at the time. They debuted the trailer for it at the Spike TV Awards, they had a marketing push for it, and then it came out. And I found a copy about it 10 years later. Deadliest Warrior, the game. And I'm just gonna come out and say it. This one is pretty bad, guys. Just a little story here, actually. My first exposure to this game was from my family's broken PS3 that could only play demos. I swear I played that thing for hours when I was a kid. The first thing I'm gonna make note here is the graphics and the animations. Like, somehow they look worse than some PS2 games. The faces are completely static, a lot of the objects are held invisibly, the characters always just kind of stand there, all the attacks have weird animations with no weight to them. One of the most egregious things about this game is the lack of consistent hitboxes. For a fighting game where every attack counts, finishing blows will often barely even touch the other guy. This game lacks a lock-on camera, meaning you can't strafe or strategically move, meaning you can only really move forward and back, and you can't dodge either, meaning guys like the ninja have zero defensive options. Fighting games are also known for their ridiculously high skill ceilings, where professionals can master every move with pinpoint precision to win fights. But just for review, I was able to do a completely casual run just by spamming spear attacks. The game modes are also a real shame. You got arcade, you got practice, and you got battle mode. Arcade and battle mode are exactly the same, so have fun playing 10 fights in a row with no differences and nothing else. Honestly, looking back at these movie tie-in games, this game reminds me most of the NES era. This is just a completely unplayable, glitchy mess of a game. Just for comparison, let's take a look at Dark Souls here, which came out about a few months after this game. The graphics are all polished, there's a lock-on camera, the weapons are all varied and have satisfying weight to them, the AI responds to how and when you attack, your weapons actually physically hit the target, it just makes for a much more enjoyable combat experience. So yeah, Deadliest Warrior the game, it's pretty bad. A relic from a bygone era, the final glimpse of bad movie tie-in games.
So that's it. That's all I had about Deadliest Warrior, the video game. I hope you guys liked this video. I actually had a really nice time making it. So if you liked it, please just give me a subscribe, and I hope to see you soon.